What's up guys, Ken here from Goldman Motor Sales, and today we're taking a look at one of my favorite English cars of all time. This is the Lotus Esprit V8, and I feel like it's a car people don't really know much about. So today we're going to go over a little bit of the history, take a walk around this one, and explain to you guys why I love the Esprit V8. So we begin by talking about the design of this car. This is the classic wedge shape, and this is a Giugiaro design. At the time this car was designed, it was 1971. We were just coming out of the 60s with really round shapes, especially from Lotus, like with the Europa. They're really round, beautiful cars, and this was a total departure. This would redefine all sports car language really through the 80s and 90s. It's very low slung, very angular, and just very different, a folded paper design as it was referred to at the time. The original car was referred to as just the silver car, and it went through several different iterations on several different design platforms. And it was in October 1975 that the Paris Motor Show that this car was released to the world. This obviously is a little bit different, as it was around for almost 30 years. This car received tons of design updates and variations. And as Justin and I were just talking about, it really looks like a car from the 80s, even though this car was made in the 2000s. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of the design differences from the early cars. So looking at it from a side profile, you can tell the Esprit really didn't change all that much. The side profile is largely the same as the car you would see in James Bond. It was the same as the initial concept car. But things that were added with the V8, namely the rear wing at the back, is one of the key design elements of this car. It just looks crazy. Additionally, the wheels got bigger, they got wider. I happen to love the shadow chrome finish on these wheels. It looks really nice. And little parts that got taped onto the car basically from Lotus, the carbon fiber front splitter and things like that, just made it nicer. Over a period of time also, the interior become more refined. They'd use nicer materials. If you compare an early car to these are much nicer, this being the last series of Esprits to be made. But largely, the shape is very similar, very flat, plain from the top of the windshield all the way down to the front bumper. That's one of the things that makes the Esprit one of the great lineages of all time. Lotus has always been about lightweight. So when this car came out, it originally had a 4-cylinder engine making about 160 horsepower. So not very powerful at all. But over time, Lotus's competition became faster, more powerful, and they felt the need to put a bigger engine in it, and that's exactly what you find in this car. You find a 350 horsepower twin-turbo V8 mid-engine. It's a flat-plane crank engine, so there are a lot of similarities between this and the Ferrari 355 that came before it, and then later the 360. But this engine makes 350 horsepower, as I mentioned, but it is capable of making 500 horsepower very easily. The reason it doesn't is because the transmission can't handle that kind of power. So Lotus purposely detuned the car so that it would be able to handle the power. But again, coupled with the lightweight and that amount of horsepower, it's still a very fun car to drive. 0 to 60 is accomplished in 4.4 seconds. And even in 2003, this car was keeping up with its competition with very few issues. So one of the things we notice when you open the door initially is just how light this car is. The door feels like it's nothing. It's extremely light to open. It's kind of shocking the first time you do it, but then you get in the cabin, and that's where this car really feels like a low slung sports car. You feel like you're sitting low in the road. Your view is very, disappears completely from here. You can't see the front of the nose or anything in this car. But everything's very purposeful. Nothing is here that doesn't need to be. All of your buttons are labeled very clearly. The shifter is easily accessible. The clutch is pretty communicative, not super heavy, and the shift is nice and short. And the shift knob is extremely close to the steering wheel, so you don't have to waste time moving from the steering wheel over. It pays homage to a lot of Lotus's racing heritage, and this is very much a driver's car. So there's not a lot of room in here. Headroom is tight. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got a little bit of headroom, but not too much. It's kind of what you'd expect, of a Ferrari of the 90s. But it's a very cool place to be. It feels very exotic, but the leather is actually very soft in here. There are a couple different trims that you could get for this car. I believe this is a GT, which is a little bit more, things are a little nicer in here. Everything, there's lots more leather. In general, it's a really cool place to be. This feels like an exotic, low-slung sports car, just as it is. So one of my favorite parts about these cars is really how underappreciated they are. And you know, this car has 15,000 miles on it, and we're asking 73,900 for it. And I think this car is very commensurate with that price. I think the design, the driving characteristics of the car, the wonderful sounding V8 engine, the manual transmission, all of it is definitely worth that price tag. So if you're interested in a car like this, and if you've never really thought about the Lotus Esprit, do take a second look at it. Check it out on marshallgoldman.com. We have lots of pictures of the car posted there. And if you have any questions, as always, leave them down in the comments below. We'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.